Pete Buttigieg continues to be one of the best surrogates the Democratic Party has as far as going into the lion's den and fighting the people at the Fox propaganda network. Now, to Fox's credit, they continue to have Pete back on, and I think that's a very good thing because Fox News viewers are not presented with the same reality or the same set of facts that Pete Buttigieg can bring to the table. So let's go ahead and take a look at this interview from Lawrence Jones at the Fox propaganda network. And he's interviewing Pete at the DNC. And then we'll take a little bit closer look at how Fox News uses data to spin different realities for their viewers. Let's go ahead and take a look at Pete.
About the record of the Biden-Harris administration. When you look at inflation, it's up 19.4%. When you look at the southern border, it's 8.1 encounters. When you look at crime, violent crime across 66 major cities, it's up almost 10% at 9.6%. Is that a record that you can run on?
Well, certainly the Biden-Harris record of bringing crime down compared to why crime went up under Donald Trump. And I often wonder, whether viewers of this network are aware that violent crime went up under Donald Trump. I think that deserves more coverage so we can ask ourselves why. And some of that has to do with policy, but some of that has to do with the message we send. When you have Donald Trump, an unrepentant convicted criminal, running against a prosecutor like Kamala Harris, we have an opportunity to send a message about whether we're serious on law and order in this country or whether it's a talking point, whether it's just something people try to use as a political theme for partisan gain. You want to talk about inflation? Inflation went up in every country after COVID, but we brought inflation down in this country. Of course, the most important question, every election is about the future, right? And in the future, economists predict that the Trump plan will increase costs for American families by $3,900. So why would we go back to somebody's going to make it worse?
I don't want you to think that the crime issue or inflation issue is something new because I've been covering it for years. I go out there and talk with voters every single day.
So you did cover the increase of crime under Trump.
Yes.
So as you can see, Pete Buttigieg is exceptionally good at this. Not only is he able to take these things point by point by point, but he's often able to use these arguments and flip them around on the Republicans or Donald Trump. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at the actual numbers that Fox News is trying to use to spin up their narrative. If we take a look closely at what they have listed here for inflation, it's 19.4%. But that is not even close to true. The whole idea behind this is to scare the viewer into thinking that inflation is still wildly out of control. And that is just not the case. We'll get into some of those numbers a little bit later. We can also do the same for violent crime. They want you to think that violent crime is up by almost 10%. But if you look at the little label below it, it says total violent crime in 66 major cities. That's a bit curious. And this is not how we normally measure overall crime. This is starting to look like cherry-picked data. They want to pick 66 cities where crime is actually rising so they can spin an overall narrative to their viewers to make them think that crime is out of control. We can also look at the 8.1 million border encounters. Now, they don't provide any context for this number. They don't delineate between a border encounter, an asylum seeker, or an illegal crossing. No, none of that is given here. They just want that big number to stand out because they want you to believe that immigration is wildly out of control and that is still an ongoing issue that Trump can handle if he were to be reelected. That is what their motivation is. But let's go ahead and take a look at the actual crime rate really quick and see that as we zoom out a little bit, that we know crime is going down.
But once again, the facts are not quite what he said. First, let's just talk about crime in general. He likes to think the country's in the middle of some crime wave. That is actually not true. Violent crime per 100,000 people has dropped 26% under Joe Biden, from an average of 398 per 100,000 people down to 294. What is even more amazing is that it, in fact, ended Trump's administration slightly higher than when it began. Or certainly, at best, most favorably, you can't see any improvement under Trump's administration. All the improvement has been under the Biden administration.
All of the improvement has been under the Biden administration. But Fox News wants you to believe that that crime rates are sky high. They want you to believe that there's an epidemic of violent crime, migrant crime, whatever the narrative that they want. They will cherry pick the data to try to make their case. But like I said, we zoom out and we understand that crime is falling at quite a fast rate. And if we look even before the Biden administration, we saw that crime numbers actually spiked up a little bit during the pandemic. But you don't hear the Democrats out there saying that, Donald Trump was the cause of a huge crime spike in the last year of his administration. That's just not how the Democrats operate. So we need to pay attention to this data that Fox is constantly using to spin these false narratives for their viewers. Let's go ahead and move on to inflation, where we can actually see that inflation is just about at our sweet spot. Let's go ahead and take a look.
The inflation rate cooled in July. It's now at its lowest level since the pandemic ended. The consumer price index dropped to 2.9%. That's down from 3% in June. It's the first time the index dipped beneath 3% since March of 2021. The key economic indicator does raise pressure on the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates as soon as next month.
So again, we zoom out and we contextualize these numbers a bit, and we understand that inflation is heading in the right direction. Now, that's not to say that inflation is not a problem and that prices are going down. That is just not how inflation works. But what I am trying to say is that Fox News is trying to use an aggregate number of 19.4% inflation to try to scare Americans into thinking that inflation is not becoming under control, when that is the exact opposite of the truth. And we can go ahead and do the same for border crossings. They want to say that there is 8.1 million encounters without providing any additional context as to what that means. And then if we look at the month-over-month numbers, we start to learn that these numbers are also going down. Let's take a look.
Inside the numbers on the falling migrant encounters at the nation's southern border in July. So migrant encounters along the southern border do continue to drop. A little over 104,000 encounters reported this last month by Customs and Border Protection. That's the lowest number since February of 2021. But it is still in the top 5 for all Julys. It is finally surpassed, though, by a year not in the 2020s. Encounters were slightly higher in July of 2000. Compared to the last few years, encounters are dropping like it's hot. That's right. Despite the intense heat along the border, average encounters from 2020 to 2023 rose from June to September. This broke a trend from the past decades where encounters either declined or stayed even during the summer months.
So again, if we zoom out, we contextualize the numbers, we look at the trends, we understand that border encounters are also headed in the right direction. Now, Fox had a point when Biden first came into the office. Things were starting to open back up after COVID, and things at the border were chaotic, and they were an issue. But fast forward to now, and Biden signs an executive order that has really dampened the numbers that we are seeing. And they also don't want to mention to you that it was the Republicans that stood in the way of a bipartisan border bill that would have helped curb these numbers much sooner. So we just need to really make sure that we're zooming out and we're looking at the numbers, we're looking at the trends in an appropriate way. We can't take Fox News' word for it that inflation is up almost 20%, violent crime is up almost 10%, and that millions upon millions of people are pouring into this country, because that is not what is happening. But Fox News is going to cherry pick these data points to spin a narrative for their viewers in hopes that they will vote for their guy, Donald Trump, this November. So we need to be vigilant. We need to make sure we're calling this stuff out as often as we can. And we need to help bring everybody back to a shared reality. Fox News is not helping us do that. They are an active participant in spinning up a second reality. So we need to call this stuff out every time we see it and make sure that we're presenting more contextualized and more accurate understandings of these types of numbers. So that's going to do it for me on this one, folks. If you got anything out of this video, if you could remember to smash that like button and hit subscribe, maybe share it with a friend or two, I'd very much appreciate that. If you think I got something wrong, or if you disagree with me about something, feel free to drop a comment below. And if you want to learn how Trump spins false narratives for his MAGA supporters, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. And I will see you guys on the next one.